Associate Director of the Atlas Institute, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's Entrepreneurs Unplugged. Before we get started, Brad started a tradition which I like, of figuring out who we have in the audience. We always have a broad variety. So if you're a student or faculty member, please raise your hand. Okay. And how about somebody working in or who has worked in a startup? And keep your hand up if you were a founder of a startup. Okay, that's incredible. So, given that makeup, I'd like to take the next 60 seconds, 60 to 95 seconds, turn and introduce yourself to somebody sitting around you that you don't already know.
Parking and access is a little tricky. Parked over by the sink and walked in. Good planning. So I got stuck over there. I was like,
that will follow tonight's event. So right after this event, go out into the lobby and hopefully you can continue some of those conversations. The Unplugged series was designed partly for this function of bringing together people from a diverse set of backgrounds to learn more about and engage more in entrepreneurship. And we thank you all for being part of that. The series is co-sponsored by Atlas and the Silicon Flatirons Center. And tonight we're lucky to also be sponsored by Kurtz Fargo LLP and the Boulder Software Club. And I'd like to say a special thank you to Richard Bass, the founder of the Boulder and Denver Software Clubs and a longtime advocate for the Entrepreneurs Unplugged series. And Richard will have a couple of informed audience questions for us. Where are you?
How can you miss? Stand up, Richard.
Informed audience questions for us as we go through tonight's event. But before I get to that, I'd like to just take a second to talk about upcoming events. Brad, you have a couple?
Yeah, in particular, March 22nd is the Silicon Flatirons Annual Entrepreneurship Conference. This year we're going to be taking a deep dive into angel investing. Jeff Clavier, super angel nationally known, is going to be one of our keynote speakers. Also, Jeff Sohn, who is the executive director of the Center for Venture Research at the University of New Hampshire, which has been doing some interesting research around angel investing for some time now, will also be part of the lineup, Jason Mendelson among others. So that is March 22nd at the law school in the afternoon.
Okay, and then we have a couple of audience events. Dave?
This Wednesday at 6 p.m.
Thank you. So this Wednesday at 6 p.m., if you guys like Jim Franklin tonight, on Wednesday in the law school, he'll be back. This is for Startup Summer. It's the internship program from Startup Colorado. If you're an undergrad or if you know any undergrads who are looking for an internship with a Boulder or Denver startup, 6 p.m. in the law school in room 301 is the place they should be. Jim's going to give a sample crash course of how you turn your business idea into a business. It'll be kind of a sample preview event as to what Startup Summer interns can experience over the course of the summer. Because the program is not just a daily internship, it's also some evening events focused on entrepreneurship education. The second event is the New Venture Challenge Finals. We're going to be on April 5th. That's Thursday, 5:15 to 8 p.m. We've already had a bunch of crash courses. Zach did an awesome one for us a couple weeks ago for the IT track. So that will be published on Silicon Flatirons website, as is Jim's event on Wednesday. You can register for both of those. The New Venture Challenge event isn't up yet. If you have questions, talk to me afterwards.
One quick plug for the Founder Institute. BlogMut is, I'm Scott Yates from BlogMut, graduate of the 2010 class of Founder Institute. They had their second class last year. It was a even better class in part because of Jim Franklin. If you don't get enough of Jim Franklin tonight and Wednesday night, you should definitely do the Founder Institute so you can spend every Tuesday night with them all summer long. Anyway, it's a great program. It's a lot of fun. And if you need more information, just go to fi.co and apply for the Institute program. It's a 14-week intensive course about how to build a meaningful business, and it's actually a pretty useful tool, even if you've been around. So I started 2 businesses before I took the course, and still got a lot of them. Appreciate it very much.
Any other audience?
March 21st, Wednesday, Mr. Bernthal will be talking at Startup CU, open to the community and all students.
A lot of pressure on how it goes for us.
Also on March 21st, I'll be giving the keynote at Angel Capital Summit, so we'll be going head-to-head. That's down at the other university in Denver.
Okay, so before I turn our attention to our guests this evening, I'll introduce this evening's moderators. Brad Bernthal, who is a clinical professor at the law school and the director of the Silicon Flatiron Center's Entrepreneurship Initiative, and Brad Felt, who's the managing director of Foundry Group, and unfortunately unable to come tonight, so I will be pretending to be Brad. And for those of you who know him, that means that I'll be throwing in curse words at liberty. Tonight's guest is Jim Franklin. Jim's the CEO of SendGrid, a Foundry-backed infrastructure applications company. SendGrid replaces in-house email infrastructure to help companies avoid the headache of having to build, scale, and maintain these systems. Its clients include Foursquare, EMI, and Spotify. Before SendGrid, Jim was the CEO, CFO, and VP of Sales at Decisioneering, which was acquired by Hyperion. He was also VP and GM of Hyperion, which was acquired by Oracle. And he was VP of Enterprise Performance Management and the General Manager of the Crystal Ball Global Business Unit of Oracle.
What's going to be fun is when SendGrid acquires Oracle.
So we'll learn more about each of those steps along the way. But first, given that we have students in the audience, I like to start with that phase of your life, the sort of high school, college time period. And what did you study? And did you know that you were going to be an entrepreneur?
Well, the high school phase, I loved school, loved all parts of school, but somehow I got in my head that I liked business. I grew up in Pennsylvania, went to the College of William & Mary Liberal Arts School, but they have one of the top accounting programs in the country. And so being generally attracted to hard things, I thought, that sounds fun, so I'll go study accounting, but with no real intention of being an accountant. I just wanted to be sort of a business person. And so I graduated with an accounting degree, passed the CPA exam, but what do you do, right? So I went off to law school. So I figured if accounting teaches you how to add and subtract, I go to law school to learn how to read and write, and be that well-rounded person I thought that I would become at William & Mary. And I got to law school for 1 semester, and during the finals of my contracts, I walked out of the finals exam. I was so frustrated with law students in general that I thought, the only thing I like about contracts is calculating damages. So I decided to cross-apply back to the MBA program. And then, of course, in the general theme of you should finish what you start, I did the JD MBA. So I did finish law school and took lots of great courses like criminal law and constitutional law and things, but did a lot of tax and business stuff, and then did the MBA. And it was in the MBA program as where I learned about venture capital and software and where technology intersects. So that's where I sort of thought, okay, this is something that sounds like it would be fun to do. I also got into triathlons at that point in my life. And so being in Virginia in 1991, 92, not many people were doing triathlons. There's probably 3 of us training full time. And, I was really busy in law school, but other than studying all the time, I was training. And so that's when I decided to move west and come to Boulder, because there was venture capital here and triathlons right here at sort of West Pearl. And that was 92. So this is my 20th year of being based in sort of the West Pearl area.
All right, so you get out to Colorado. You don't know anybody, I assume?
Almost. So, even back then it was hard to find a job, out of law school, et cetera. it was very hard to be in Virginia and try and find a job in Colorado. Tried with some firms that were like national, like interviewing in the DC office or something, and they're like, no, if you want a job there, you got to go there. So I had a 73 Land Cruiser and packed it up with my triathlon bike, interview suit, and this is all sort of pre-web days, right? And so I had to kind of do the job search by hand. And so kind of moved out here more or less sight unseen in the summer of '92.
Thinking that you were looking for law firm jobs?
Oh no, so I thought I could get a job in the venture capital industry, which back then had partners and people who opened the mail. There was no real concept of an associate. So there was Hill, Carmen, Kirby, and Washington were at 9th and Arapahoe, and so I just come like, hey, I'm here. Of course, they didn't know I was coming, right? And they were like, hey, nice guy, get out of here, right? And so it took a long time to find a job. And so I'm 26. My peers from the accounting program had been off in industry for 4 years, making good salaries, buying cars, being in apartments, getting married. And I was kind of the flaky guy who went to law school, then business school, then moved to Colorado. And then I get here, and it's like no one knew what to do with me. Because I was 26, I never really had a proper job. I taught tennis actually in the summers, and I had too much education, no experience. So it's a little bit quirky. But the one guy I did know was at Coopers and Lybrand, Jeff Rudolph. And it was an introduction from one of the Coopers offices in Richmond, I think. And when I met him, he said, you need to go to Rocky's Venture Club. And so this was in probably July. And so then I went there in September of '92. And I showed up looking kind of like, Corey, raise your hand. So I looked kind of like that. And just out of law school and had all this time and was fresh and eager. And they're like, we're going to put you to work. And so I was on the membership committee, so I'd call people. I was on the sponsorship committee, calling people for money. I would fill panels by calling, the local VCs, which is something I wanted to do. And what I remember from that first time is that every time you called someone, maybe not the sponsors, they're a little trickier, but to speak on panels, everyone always said yes. From '92 forward, there's this very consistent theme that people want you to be successful, and they want to help. And so for 2 years, I did that, 10 to 20 hours a week. Again, I wasn't busy, right? No kids and family and all that stuff. So I was just talking to you this week about doing that, right? Just really do a lot of different things. I ended up having to get a day job. I started temping at Robert Half, right? I didn't know how fast I could do a 10 key. I didn't know what a 10 key was. I'm like, I'm a CPA. I don't know how to run a 10 key. And it's pretty good Excel, though. But I did some, just temporary work for Pace Membership Workhouse and Bentonite Corporation down in Denver. And so that was just enough to kind of barely pay the bills along the way. And
what did you get out of the interaction with the RVC and other community organizations? And it sounds like that set a precedent that really continues to this day. So the announcements were a good example. Founders Institute, Techstars, Silicon Flatirons, On Campus, Startup Colorado. I mean, you are involved in addition to your day job and family work.
Yeah, all that stuff. So the Angel Capital Summit was sort of put on by Rocky's Venture Club. So 20 years later, that theme still goes through. One of the things I did was I was part of the Government Affairs Committee. And this consisted of Eric Weissman and I drinking beer in Lodo and complaining about the government. And some things don't change. Eric's now running for Congress here in Boulder, so I think he's going to be part of the government. But it was 2 years after sort of this, having a day job that was a little sketchy, but doing all the fun stuff at night, all the volunteer work. Eric said, "Hey, why don't you join my business as CFO?" So that was my first sort of big break. But it took 2 years of sort of giving without an expectation of return, just because I thought it was fun to hang around interesting, smart people doing, cool things. And I knew Eric worked at the 1380 Lawrence down in Denver, so it's like a real office building with, offices. And I thought, like, my dad wore a three-piece suit to work all the time, and I was like, so Eric always wears like paisley shorts and loafers and pink button-downs that aren't tucked in, and it's kind of goofy. And I was just thought, what's this all about? And they had cartoons on their doors and stuff. I'm like, this is not my dad's office. But the first day I showed up to work, I wore a suit, and he thought that was hilarious. He's like, you got to lose the suit. So fast forward all the way to SendGrid, we wear hoodies right all the time. I wore a hoodie to a board meeting last month. They was like, you've changed. So it's been a long arc. But yeah, that was sort of my first opportunity to sort of restart the Decisioneering crystal ball business in the summer of '94.
Let's talk about that business. Okay. So crystal ball, maybe you can baseline up. What was the original idea that you're getting involved with in 1994?
Eric Weissman is a super smart guy, and way back in 1988, when Excel was on the Mac, he got the vision that Microsoft Excel is cool, but it's not cool enough because it does math with numbers. And he understands the world more finely in that when you think about future numbers, like what your sales might be in a future period, it's really it's an uncertain number, and so it's a probability curve. And so he figured out a way to do math in Excel with probability curves, which became a really big idea, and it took a long time to do that. But that was called Monte Carlo simulation in Excel was the core product, and I see a few crystal ball people here, which is great. And that is well, it's a long story, but that was the core idea in '94. So he'd raised a little bit of money from Roser Ventures, and had crashed the business. So he'd laid off himself in June of '94, and then it was that fall, he was restarting the business. There's a funny thing happens if you've got some revenue and your expenses are too high. If you fire everybody, the revenue doesn't go to zero. In this case, it was about $60K a month would show up in checks to a post office box in Boulder. And so he's like, well, we need someone to receive the checks and deposit them. And the problem was there was about several $100,000 worth of debt. And so we had a small fire hose and a big fire that started to put out the fire. And eventually the hose got bigger and the fire got smaller.
And so you step in when the hose is small and the fire
Very small,
is big, and
very big.
what was that decision like? How did you decide, yep, this is the right call?
Anyone know where the cruise room is? Down in Lodo at the Oxford Hotel? Anyone been to the men's room in the cruise room?
Where's this going to?
Well, there's martinis involved. It was very late. And Eric's like, hey, you want to work for me? And I thought, that sounds fun, better than the job I've got. And he's like, I don't know if it'll last more than 30 days or 90 days. But I was like, what the heck? And so actually I was outside counsel. So here's the law degree was helpful. So there were so many creditors and stuff suing them that it was just a nightmare. Someone had to do all that litigation. And so I basically set up a law practice in Boulder at 1526 Spruce Street, right behind the Mountain Sun Brewery, which turns out to be a handy thing. You can grab your drink right off the top and go fill it up and go right back. And so for a year, we kind of did a contractor relationship where I got paid every week and kind of managed all the money and the litigation, and would go to Denver and we'd make our vendors sort of earn their money 3 times. Once when they did the product or service, once when they went through all the litigation and sued us properly, which is not easy to do if you paid attention to your civil procedure, which I did. And then the 3rd time was after you get a judgment, it's not easy to collect the cash. So we became experts at managing cash in the nth degree, to say the least.
You learn a lot in Entrepreneurs Unplugged, drinking.
Hang out in the cruise room, you might get picked up as a CFO, right? But it's just you, again, develop relationships. When you do all that volunteer work, people get to know who you are, how you think, and how you execute. So I became the treasurer, put on the Colorado Capital Conference. I kind of did all this stuff. And so you become a known quantity. So that's why I think it's awesome for people who want to get sort of wrapped into the ecosystem is like volunteer a lot. So Camilo Lopez would be a great example, another 2011 graduate of the FI who's done lots of things and is getting an award this week.
On the 22nd at the Entrepreneurship Conference.
On the 22nd. And so I think he's just done this great job of just sort of like being everywhere. Tim Falls, the community guy for SendGrid, was an intern from the CU MBA program at Techstars summer of '09 when SendGrid was graduating. And now Tim is a huge contributor to SendGrid and its success. And it's because Boulder Beta, Open Angel Forum, again, it's hard to think of an event that Tim doesn't have his finger in somehow. So
you're starting at the company and delaying payment to creditors. The money
that would be what is that? It's not fraudulent conveyance. What's that when you choose inappropriately? We would never do that.
Corey, if you can do a little legal research for the next 40 minutes. Right?
It's a preferences thing.
At what point did you start to realize, well, there's a big idea here, and this is a business that could work, and what are you learning on the fly as an entrepreneur at this point?
Well, cash is king has been my password for a long time. Cash, bang, king. And just keep your eye on your cash. I mean, as an accountant, but it's like, I never cared about financial statements. It was like, we knew how much money was in the bank at all times. We did daily bank reconciliations. We first had an audit done, and they asked, where's your bank rec? I'm like, I didn't know what they meant. I'm like, oh, you mean a bank balance sheet? It's like, I know what my balance is every day. I know if I run an Amex card on Monday, the cash will be in my bank on Friday, right? And it'll be net of fees. right? I know if I run a MasterCard on Tuesday, it'll be there on Wednesday, gross fees, right? I mean, to the penny, because we had to measure that so closely. Because we did payroll every Friday. I think cash management is the thing that really got burned into my brain. Now I work with lots of companies, I'm on the board of a couple, and I'm just shocked when people don't think about cash all the time. It's just like, how can you not know in excruciating detail what's coming in and what's going out and when and what's the difference? So maybe a visual aid here is I used to look younger than my age. And in that sort of middle 90s period, Eric Weissman was a big visionary with a small checkbook. And I was sort of in between, which is a tough spot to be when you're always spending that $1.25 for every dollar you have. But we were able to sort of keep ratcheting the business up, and it kind of got to be like a $5 million break-even business, and it kind of became a real business.
What year are we in which it's a real business?
So it was sort of 98. So after a year of being a lawyer, then I went to CFO for 3 years, so like 95, 96, 97. And from CFO, a very strange thing happened where the next day I became VP of sales. So most people think, wow, that's such a gulf. How do you go from being CFO to VP of sales? In reality, they're like this. So a CFO with no cash, where's your money come from? Customers, right? I mean, who knows the pipeline better than anybody? Me. Because it's like, I know that when you sell that next deal and when it's going to pay and with a form of payment, when it's going to come in and hit that balance sheet. And it was a very unfortunate circumstance that our VP of sales had gotten a fungus, a brain fungal infection that affected his personality, became very paranoid. And so, we had to, not have him in the office anymore. And so it really became a team problem. So I became a VP of sales because I basically had hired everybody and was around the office all the time. And they're like, you're good at teams and go do your team thing with salespeople. So I was a VP of sales and had never had a quota. And sales went okay, but it was 99. And who was in business in 99? So half people, good. So you guys might have gotten the same disease I got in 99, that internet-y web disease thing. And you're like, I like my day job, it was pretty cool, right? I liked learning sales. But Vario and all these companies just doing huge things, it's like, so I had spent, well, the other thing, there's a couple lessons here. One, I think to be a CEO, you need to do 2 out of 3 things well, right? You're going to build stuff, sell stuff, or finance stuff. And I'd grown up sort of on the finance side, and so I wanted to go sell stuff. So then I thought if I get good stripes on that, then I could be a CEO someday, which is what I wanted to do. And so that's why I wanted to go do the VP of sales side. But then I really wanted to be a founder. And being a CFO is a tough job. It's low wages and high pay. The day I flipped over and became a VP of sales, I kept the same base, but I also got 1% revenue of the company, which basically doubled my pay. And I'm like, wow, as CFO, I was first to show up and last to leave. As VP of sales, wasn't that hard. Right? I was like, I could come in late, leave early. I was like, this is pretty easy. So I got twice the money for half the work, but being an ambitious person, I started a company. So I would show up early with my co-founders at a loft down the way there on 16th Street, and we'd work on that in the morning, and then come back and do some work, and I'd go back and work on the startup thing. So that ultimately led to my being fired as the VP of sales. But it's because I was offered the CEO job right at the end of 99, but I had to commit to stay for the whole year of 2000. And I was like, I can't commit to stay because I thought our little startup might actually work. It might get funded and become a business. And when I said I couldn't stay, that's when Eric fired me on the spot. November 15th, 1999, about 2:15 in the afternoon, approximately. I don't remember very well. Going home to my wife of 2 years and saying, honey, I'm home early. And guess what? Now I'm a founder. It's a really cool thing. And I'm glad she had a good job at Array Biopharma, so that was fine. But yeah, making that transition because when you're a founder, I think having 3 founders is key. So I was one of 3, but the other 2 had committed full time. And I was still faking it with my day job, and they weren't too happy about that. They're like, look, if we go get funding and then you join us, you're going to get 1% of the company. We'll hire you as CFO or VP of sales or something. But if you want 25% was my stake as a founder, you got to quit and go full time. So things have a way of working out. Getting fired, I could go. Actually, I think I went to the company first and then went home and said, hey, I'm a founder, I'm in, guys. And they're like, awesome. Wasn't my choice, but I'll roll with it. And then I went home and said, hey, guess what? I don't have a job. But we ended up getting financing about 3 months later.
Before we transition into the next company then, I want to take you back to a couple things. One is, what did you learn about sales?
I learned all kinds of things about sales. Sales is hard. Sales is highly accountable. You don't learn anything in school about sales, like MBA programs and stuff. Talk about marketing, but nothing about sales. And so I think there's a whole sort of lesson on that. But I think it's a profession, discipline that's really done on the apprenticeship model, right? You have to kind of go out. I only know one person who intended to be a salesperson. Everyone else has sort of fallen into it one way or another. But it's what makes the world go round, right? And advice to my children or whatever is like, learning how to sell is incredibly helpful. Even just negotiation in general is incredibly helpful. Now, how many hours of negotiation do you learn in law school?
More at Colorado Law.
Oh, good. Right. More than zero, right? Or so. MBA programs, it's close to zero.
I'm not thinking about that. We've got a terrific course. Scott Peppett, for those of you who have a chance to come by the law school, we've got a world-class negotiation professor.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good. And that's good for you. I think oftentimes it's way too little. And I think when I was in CFO is when Eric Weissman made me take some negotiation classes, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. You know the first thing they teach in negotiation class? Don't tell people you study negotiation. So that's the end of that lecture. It's true.
All right, well, let me pick up one more thing that you said before, which is build something, sell something, finance something. There's the 3 core skills. You got to have 2 out of 3 in order to be a CEO. Why not some other things that come to mind, such as operations, learn how to run something, or you have this interesting background with JD and the legal background. Why those 2 of those 3 as opposed to other areas that seem potentially
Okay, so I would lump operations into this. I do this, so I call it FinOps: finance, operations, HR, facilities, legal, just all that stuff is on that leg of the stool. On the sell it is actually all the go-to-market stuff, right? So it's sales, marketing, competition, pricing, channels, all that stuff. And then on the make it side, right, it could be, there's generally all the technical people that show up at Techstars, right? So and that's why we always look at like the hustler-hacker dynamic. Some people think about that in startups. Or you're a hustler, like a salesperson, or a hacker, or a builder, right? But there's really that third role. I think that's missing that dimension. So you want to have that nice firm, stool when you kind of create that a business.
Next step. So what was the next step in your evolution?
Well, that was webfamilies.com, online baby photos, right? So we go from fancy math software to online baby photos. And I had been commuting with Mike Reagan, who's now VP Marketing at Logarithm, down to the crystal ball business together for a couple of years. And we looked at hundreds of ideas on the RTD bus and tried to look at different things. We looked at sort of healthcare IT, and we're like, what's something that, maybe 50 people, you could kind of raise $3 to $5 million, go solve it in 3 to 7 years. What's sort of the right bite-sized problem? And the sort of whole healthcare IT world is just ripe with opportunity because it's so messy. We wanted to find what's the right sort of link. And so we spend small amounts of money to do focus groups with doc admins or nurses and kind of talk to them about how they do billing with insurance companies. Is there a software solution or something like that? And just in sort of the evolving nature of things, I got connected through Rocky's Venture Club with Mark Radlauer, who's an ER doc in Denver. And ER docs are great because they've got good cash flow and they're free all day, right? Because they work at night. And so he went to MIT, so he's a smart technical person. And so I get connected with Mark, and then we connected with another person, Rick Tallman. And so we formed Web Families, and Mike had to kind of duck out because he had twins and couldn't go the founder route. And I was freshly fired, so I was all in. But I think that founding team was good in 2 reasons. One, because when I talk to people like, why don't you start a business? Well, I don't have any money, or I don't have an idea. I said, that's not the issue. The issue is, can you create a team of 3 people, that maybe one has the money and one has the idea, right? And you can be the glue or the other, the designer of this business. And so, Mark really had the idea. He was deeply wound into healthcare IT as both a doctor and a technologist. He works with the HCA, and he's kind of the doctor that approves all their enterprise IT spending decisions to make sure doctors are okay with it. Because doctors, he says, need the God button, right? It's like whatever controls they put in, he's like, I need that button that says, give me what I need right now because you're bleeding to death, right? And we're going to fix you, and we'll deal with the IT stuff later. And so he could give us deep access into HCA, which is the largest hospital chain in the US. And so he was a direct access to a customer and the core idea, which is outsourcing their baby photos. And then our other partner, Rick Tallman, had a wonderful attribute. His brother, Joe Tallman. Joe Tallman started a company that sold to another company for almost $1 billion. So Joe was a local angel investor and good guy. And so having his little brother Ricky as your partner can be handy. We raised $50,000 of angel money rather quickly. It's like, hey Joe, we need some money, right? We don't have that kind of money. And it also turns out that Joe, when you make a ton of money for a venture capital firm, I think he made about $400 million for Sequel Ventures here in town, is that the venture firm then invites you to be an investor in their next fund. So he was a limited partner in Sequel Ventures, who we were targeting as our sort of ideal investor partner. So one of my co-founders was sort of a direct access to funding, and the other one was a direct access to 1 million customers day one. So 1 million moms have babies in the US in an HCA hospital, which is about 25% of the available market. And so using your sort of your founders as those two legs of the stool was helpful. What did I do, right?
And was that planned, by the way? I mean, did you think about your
Well,
founders that way, or once you were into it, did it, oh, that's kind of nice?
Yeah, no, that was fairly deliberate, right? And again, having Mike have to step out, and Rick could step in, and he had actually just sold a company, so he had some time and money to kind of put into this as well. Maybe we could talk all night about sort of lessons learned about that. Is you're having 3 founders is good, but you need to have a clear leader. And for us, it was Mark was the real leader. But Rick ended up being CEO because he was sort of access to money. But no one ever did anything with the 3 of us working through it like a partnership, which is maybe not a good idea when you need to make a lot of decisions fast. And it's more important to be clear than right. And none of us were really the build it person. So that's part of the reason we had to raise so much money early, was using people like Mike Gelman at Spire Media did a lot of our early work. We shared an office building down there, Daniels and Fisher building in Lodo.
Can you give us a specific example of that period in which it would have been more important to be clear than right?
Well, our business model evolved quite a bit for those who were around in January, February of 2000. So we got our term sheet and commitment in February of 2000 from Sequel. They gave us $500,000 immediately. Just a wired it. I had to run down and create a bank account and stuff so they could send us money so we could get started. We opened the office March 1st of 2000. When did the NASDAQ peak? April of 2000. So this is, so we were on the upswing. We're all thinking, wow, NASDAQ's going to 10,000. Woo, this is awesome. And so we got $2.5 million from Sequel that first time, but they gave us $500,000 right away, and then they committed to close by May of 2000 on the other $2 million. And so with that $500,000, we started hiring people. We opened an office. We were kind of doing all those things. And one of the things I like about Sequel is that as the market, after it peaked in April, it went down fast. We were pitching the usual suspects around town at that time, and I remember being in Steve Leatherman's office the day we were pitching him, and the NASDAQ fell 700 points while we were standing there. It's like he wasn't really paying attention to our pitch when he was like, wow. And it was, so I thought, Sequel could very well have been like, hey, we're just going to write off the $500,000 and call it a day. It was the world had changed. And instead, they came through and funded not only that, but another $2.5 million over the course of the year as we kept looking for a business model. But through that period of time, it went from an eyeballs play. We wanted to be the next Jared Polis, right? Driving, because people go to look at baby photos, right? And so we drove a lot of people to the web, but we didn't even charge for the photos. In our first configuration of our system, there's no way to pay for anything, because that wasn't the model. So being clear would have been helpful, and you had to be fast, be like, oh shoot, it is about, now it's about revenue. And by the time we hit summer of 2000, it was about cash flow. So in 7 months, we went from sort of an eyeballs play to cash flow, which we couldn't move that fast. And our business plan called for 20 million. We never closed the other sort of 15 as sort of a B round to go out and build the system and deploy them in all the hospitals, back before there were iPhones and everything. And yeah, it was, that's right. What do we say? We're ahead of our time. So after getting fired in that business, getting it funded, we ended up parking that on March 30th, 2001. And I remember the date. It's the last business day of the quarter, and it was the day my first son was born. So another life transition was kind of putting a bookend on, the 5 quarters and the $5 million that was Web Families, was kind of parked it. There was a few other startups at that time that had crashed, very ugly. But being a good lawyer and business person, I really could and do all that financial modeling with the Crystal Ball software. I could park it really to like 0, so employees could get their accrued pay and their 401k and all that stuff. And Sequel was happy about that. And I went to John Greff, who's still the CFO there, and I said, you know, it would be handy to have like 30 grand to pay the controller to do some taxes and just pay some guys to do inventory. We had to label assets and run a sale. I told them I would stay to help do that because I felt bad for blowing $5.25 million of their dollars. And so I worked for free for a month to kind of do that. And yeah, SQL gave me the 30 grand, no problem. And I spent about 25 of it and went back to them after the end and said, hey, there's 5 grand left, you know, do you want it back? And they said, no, you keep it. And I was like, well, you know, I feel bad. I told you I work for free. And so I gave it to Rocky's Venture Club as a sponsorship, like a 2-year deal. So, you know, SQL was a sponsor for 2 years with the vapors that were web families, again, to try and recycle it. I thought about going to Vegas. I'm like, what odds do I need to turn 5,000 to 5.25 billion on just one throw of the dice or something? You'd be like, okay, we return your capital, right? Or we didn't.
Did you run it through crystal ball in terms of
yeah,
numbers?
that's pretty long odds.
All right, so you've, at this point, you've made it work with crystal ball to a certain extent, gotten fired. You've had a company that raised money and was a little bit ahead of its time, but has kind of gone sideways.
Crashed.
You've got a child.
Yeah, no, married with children, right.
Was there
So why am I here, you're saying, right? Like, where's
was there, I mean, you had degrees, you could have gone work for a bigger company at that point.
Could have gotten a job, yeah. Part of the reason you do the entrepreneurship stuff is you're really unemployable. I did work for as a lawyer one summer. It was my last summer before I moved to Colorado, and I literally could not stay awake at work. I did a 50-state survey on EMFs affecting cropland in Pennsylvania. I would just keep nodding off and have to reread the same paragraph. I just like, and these are competitive internships, right? There's like a dozen kids in this class. We're all supposed to be clamoring, for one of these slots. At the end of the summer, I shook his hand. I was like, hey, I'm moving to Colorado, so don't consider me for a job. I bet these other guys would love to work for you, but I would shoot myself if I had to do that. So you kind of self-select out of a normal job at that point. So I felt bad about blowing all that money, and I thought, I don't know what I'd go do, but I didn't think I'd work for SQL again. And they said, heck no. We just spent $5.25 billion in tuition on you, and we want a real return on that investment. And they just put $2.5 million into eSNF. Who's ever heard of eSNF? Vericept, you know that one, right? So eSNF was a little company down in the tech center that they just put some money into with a technical founder and someone who was a quasi-business person as a co-founder, and it needed a lot of attention. And so I was completely burned out from having gone through a founder experience. Is really hard, right? It's just all-consuming, and my son wasn't a good sleeper. So anyway, so I went down there and I said, this looked like a pretty good deal. My friend Mike Reagan was there, and I saw him pitch at the Rockies Venture Club annual thing in the summer of 2000. I was like, this could be huge. Did network content monitoring, create a new category. So it was a box you stick in the network, and it shows the network owner, i.e. your employer or the university, what's happening in the network when you think no one's looking. So it's rather eye-opening, the stuff you find on the network. So people doing shopping or sports stuff or other things you shouldn't be doing on a network when you should be working. So I thought that was a big deal if they could make that work. So yeah, that looked like it was a very easy job. They said there was $300,000 a month in expenses and $200,000 a month in revenue, and they just raised $2.5 million. Something, let's see, 300 minus 200, it's 100,000 a month. You got 2-point-something million. That's like 2 years worth of money. I'm like, I'm used to having like counting cash balances in hours, days or maybe weeks, but not months to years. So I thought this would be an easy job. I'll go down there and just put it in cruise control, right, and rest up. And I show up there, and they had $800,000 in the bank, and they had $300,000 a month to spend and no revenue. Well, they had no cash coming in. Forget the revenue word, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute. If you have $800,000 in the bank and you're spending $300,000 a month, that's not very long until you go splat. And they had 25 employees showing up to work every day like everything was cool. And it was like hair on fire time. This was 2001.
Tell us about a little bit about your personality and how you approach that. You come in off of a kind of tough experience, you're not sleeping. What was your reaction to learning that?
Probably realism, right? Things, I know a lot of people in the room, right? You hear business stories all the time, right? And it's like, and they're usually not very true, right? It's like, right? And it turns out in this case, it was Mike Reagan, my friend, who was doing the sales accounting on a whiteboard, right? It's like, I love Mike, and he's an awesome salesperson and marketing person, but we don't let him in by the accounting system, right? That's not what he does. And so having salespeople tell you the cash flow numbers is not a good idea. So again, I studied accounting, I like doing hard things, right? And so I was like, okay, you need to do fundraising again. And the founders did not like that. They did not like the dilution they just took. They think VCs are evil. And I was just like, oh, part of the reason I do Founder Institute is to educate founders on what are different kinds of financing, right? There's not good financing and bad financing. They're just all different. They have different consequences. And just know what you're getting into, right? It's not a big surprise that people are motivated certain ways. But it's just, if you don't know, then there's misset expectations and things get bad. So that summer, I thought, okay, we'll try and, I said, I can make the money last till September 30th by, cutting costs and quit hiring people and all that. And I said, we have to go out and raise the money this summer. And people say, oh, I hate it when people say, is this a good time to raise money or a bad time to raise money, right? It's like, I don't know, it's always a good time and a bad time. It's always hard. It's always long odds. It's like, when do you want to, now is good, right? I mean, VCs have a very comfortable life. It's not like they go on vacation in the summer, right? I mean, they go to places when it's nice, right? It's like, which is, depending where it is, it can be any time of the year, right? So we just, we wrote a plan, by May, and we basically had kind of one shot at it, and we decided to go to there was a big public company called ISS. So let's rewind their clock 5 years. What would they look like when they were small? And so we said, okay, let's pretend we're them, and say, so we're ISS circa that year, right, which would have been like 1996. And who were their early investors? And it turns out it was Sigma Partners, a guy named Bob DeVoli up in Boston, which Mike Reagan just happened to know. Those coincidences in life. So we had a good introduction to Bob. He took our meeting. Again, we had very little money, but we flew the two founders and Mike and myself up there like business class. We're like, heck, you got one shot. It doesn't matter. It's like, we want to be rested, ready. We're going to stay at a nice hotel, and we're going to go do our little pitch. And we said to Bob DeVoli, we said, we think we're ISS circa 1996. He said, I agree. I'm like, wow. He says, I have a big fund. You want to raise $3 million, and my minimum is 5. I won't do anything less than 5. Well, the founders, what's their concern? Dilution. So now I'm like, oh, all right, I got the investor on board. Now the founders are like, no way, we don't want to do that. He's crazy, Boston, we don't like that guy, we're not taking it, F-bomb, 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 right? And they wanted to put a coalition together of some of the local investors around here, which would take forever, right? As much as I like our investors, it's a hard, long process. Here we have a strategic, awesome investor ready to go. At any rate, about get fired again with the founders. They were unhappy with me and the board, because I wasn't only on the board, I just sort of influenced it. We had 4 people on the board. We had 2 people from SQL, who obviously I knew and liked since they backed me, and then the 2 founders. And then I was the CFO, so I was actually in the room, right? So there were 5 people in the room, and in boards, you don't actually vote. It's not like, okay, straw poll, right? It's just 5 people sitting in a room talking about something, right? But if 3 of them were like, yeah, I think we should take the $5 million, and 2 of them were like, no, I don't think that's a good idea, the 3 kind of shot down the 2. And then we walked out of this when they threatened to fire me again. I was just like, okay. And they told me to never talk to the board again without them present, which was a little interesting, because I knew him really well. It was Ken McDonald, who's now at Team Snap, and we were triathlon training buddies together. We were the sequel triathlon team, right? So I was like, can't talk to him. And so that got a little weird. So I asked Jim Linfield, who's at Cooley, who's a friend of mine from running stuff as well as business. I said, I think I've got a problem. He's like, nice kettle of fish you got yourself into. He says, well, there's always a dashed line from the CFO up to the board, right? It's not like CFO, CEO, board. And so like with all companies I'm part of, I always want managers to talk to the board directly. And if you're on a board, you should definitely talk to managers directly. And if the CEO doesn't want you to do that, get rid of that CEO. That's just bad, bad, bad. Hopefully, Tim, you don't do that. Good, okay. Okay, so it's like, that's very key to have that direct communication. But anyway, so we got Bob to shake our hand on August 25th of 2001. What was coming around the corner? August 25th, 2001? Did we know that on August 25th, 2001? No. But we had good execution, and it was just once someone says, I want to wire you $5 million, you don't do anything other than whatever's the next step until that wire hits the bank. And so we kind of worked right through Labor Day weekend, and they wired us the money on September 10th. It hit the bank about 1:30, and we had, again, I could make the money last till September 30th. We're talking zero. So we probably had 50 grand, 25 grand left in the bank just to do the last payroll, and this was our one shot. And then boom, $5 million hit. So what do you do after $5 million hits the bank? Have a party, right? Pizza, beer, da, da, da. What do you do the next morning? Go to work. So 6:30 in the morning, I'm down at the tech center, doing my work. Mike comes in, he's like, you should come see the TV. I'm like, man, I'm busy. We just raised money. It's called day one, right? You raise money, it's day one all over again, right? Back at work. Got to go deliver on that. He's like, no, seriously, come check this out. I was just like, oh, man. I mean, it was bad for the country and everything like that, but I'm just thinking, no one buys new stuff, right? We couldn't go try and sell anything for like 5 months. And of course, we had to pay payroll, we had to pay rent, and so we just burned a big hole in our balance sheet again. And we do an inside round in April, but it was interesting, lucky to have to, when you have to focus on execution. But when someone wants to give you money, sprint, because you don't know when bombs will fall, towers, whatever happens, you want to get done. So at SendGrid, we just raised $21.6 million January 17th. We basically had it done on December 11th. And so for me to wait around for 5 weeks, I just kept thinking, oh no. I don't want the next chapter in the story to be like, oh, we lost it, right? It wouldn't really matter, but it's just good that we got it done.
There's two pieces I really want to pick up in the next 5 to 10 minutes if we can before we open up to, and Richard's going to go first and there was questions. But one is, when you were fired by Eric, it was at 1998?
99.
99 the first time.
November 15th, 2:15.
So obviously you weren't too happy about it. I suspect that you didn't say anything, because talk us back as to how you get involved with Decisioneering again.
Okay.
First, and then I want to make sure that we get to SendGrid as well.
Okay, so we raised the $5 million, Sigma Partners, Bob joins our board, we go off to the races. 2 conditions of raising the money. And again, once he says yes, we race for the door, right? You put your hand and get out of the door, right? Don't sell past yes. And as our hand was on the door, our backs are to him, he says, 2 conditions. 1, you have to change the name. Well, eSNF was kind of a stupid name, so like, right on. 2, you got to hire a CEO. I'm like, yes, because these founders needed leadership. And it's like, great. So like, best efforts to hire a CEO. So we hired a CEO, and then we needed one so badly, I think we kind of rushed the decision. Big mistake. At that point, you're like, geez, anybody is better than nobody, right? Having sort of the twin, if the 2 people are in charge, nobody's in charge problem. So like, we got one guy who was in charge, and it was like, he was super clear, and that was good. And we got along for about a year, but having a CEO come in where there's a board and then there's me as CFO, and that guy, felt threatened, to say the least, that I was telling the board stuff in real time, how things were going. And he didn't like that. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just he likes to really kind of manage that information. If there's bad news, you want good news, right? Sometimes it's hard to give bad news. And if the good news isn't real, sometimes the CFO can be pressured to, call a deal a deal. Like, we missed our quarter, but we closed a big deal. Well, what if the big deal is not actually closed? So in accounting, which is just like law for business, right? You got to hit 4 rev rec criteria. If you don't hit them all, not a deal, right? It's like, there's a lot of judgment in there about whether you hit them or not, but this one wasn't even close. So he ends up firing me. So I was 2 years into Vericept after I felt like I'd done a pretty good job. I was like, dang, so now it's summer of '03 and I'm on the beach, going, why do I keep getting fired from responsible jobs? And so it's values conflict, right? It's where 2 different value systems collide. That's why I was like, all right, I need to figure out what my values are. How do I interview for them so that I can go find another job as a CFO of a venture-backed company and have a team that I mesh with, so I don't have that third uncomfortable conversation with my wife saying, I'm home early today, honey. It's like, it's Monday at 10. What are you doing here, right? I probably went running. I don't remember what I did exactly that day. But it still I was not happy to be fired from that. I thought it was going to be a very big company. And so I kind of got that values thing sort of figured out when I was on the beach. And also kind of the job search process that I'd be happy to share with you, as I've had to run it a few times. Turns out it's the same one as venture capital, and it's the same one as how you sell a company. But
Let's do it.
Well, it's kind of a long story. So it's, again, it starts with the values. Know who you are. Work a who list, right? I had a list of about 175 people, whether it's venture capitalists or job prospects. Categorize them into sets of 20. You can manage 20 relationships at a time. Do 20 per week. And your objective is to basically, one of the sales tips is sell people to know, right? Don't buy my company, don't give me money, and don't give me a job is your goal. And try and get through the list as fast as you can. And you'll be surprised what happens. Someone
sell people to know.
To know, because what you'll find out what happens is someone will say yes. You'll be like, well, I was trying to get to know when you said yes. It's kind of odd, but that's the way it works. So you do the who list, and when you go to the who's, you have another list next to it called an opportunity list, because every time you meet someone, you'll find there's an opportunity. Maybe a lot of them will be free work, someone wants help with a business plan or whatever it is, but you realize you have a lot of opportunities out there. Maybe one will be in Fort Collins, you're like, good opportunity, but too far away. Maybe one's with a great team, but you don't really like the market. And what you'll find, there's a bunch of decision vectors going on in your head. And so on the third column, you can say, okay, how do I rank those opportunities? What are my 5 criteria? For me, it was team. I want a team I can learn from. I want to have a significant role. I want market traction. I want the location to be somewhere hopefully closer to Boulder than farther away. And then comp. And comp had 2 dimensions. One is equity and one is cash, in that order. And cash is a binary variable. It's either 0 or 1. It's kind of market or nothing. It seems to be it works. But what you'll find is you look at your different opportunities, like, would I choose this one over that one? Which of these rules are in play? And it's pretty quick. You can come up with this little system. And then what you can do is you can create Frankenstein, right? It's like, if I had this team with this role and this with this kind of market traction and this location with this equity and this cash comp, that would be my perfect deal. So when I talk to people and I say, well, what is it you're looking for? That's what I want to hear. I want to give me your ideal, right? And so Tim Miller here tonight, I was like, I would do anything for Tim, right? I thought I could learn a lot from him, right? And I wanted to be a CEO someday. So I'm like, I would go, but I want some significant executive role, but maybe it'd be some kind of ops role or services or something I hadn't done before. But just to be around a team that I could learn from would be awesome. And I would even do it if it was in the tech center. And if it was, bad wages and that kind of stuff, right? And so you get a sense for how those trade-offs work. But the same fundamental process works to raise money or sell something.
Take us back to Decisioneering.
So how do I get to Decisioneering? So I'm on the beach, figuring out the values thing. I came up with this 4H, honest, hungry, humble, happy system with an interview process for it. It wasn't exactly that, but we ended up getting the 4th H later. Honest, hungry, humble, happy. And they're not what they necessarily seem. Honest is transparent. The interview question is, tell me a time when you bent the rules. And you're looking for a nice, good, substantive question. And if someone says, I never ever bend rules, and I'm like, tell me the time being honest cost you something. And those are good questions. Honest, hungry, sense of initiative, starting stuff. Humble, learning from others. And then the 4th one is happy. And we call that doing business Colorado style. So it's what you do for fun outside of work and family. And you have to have a deep story, right? If it's like, I like to golf. It's like, what's your goal for the year? What's your plan? How are you going to get there? So Michael Tognetti, I've worked with for a long, long time. He's a psycho golfer, right? And he's just he's like, this year I'm going to golf tech and I'm getting custom clubs and I'm changing my grip and I'm doing all this stuff, right? It's like, so it's that same sense of intensity that people bring to their passions outside of work that you just want to channel towards some of your business objectives. Anyway, so I had these 4 values. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I can now interview for them so I can, if I were to meet Tim and his team, I want to kind of see how do they line up so that he doesn't fire me 2 years later, and chapter 4 in the story. And a very strange thing happens. Eric Weissman calls, the guy who fired me in '99. He's like, hey, I know you want to be a general manager. We need a guy in London. Would you go run the London office? We just remodeled our house, and good thing to do when you're broke and have no job. So we kind of cut that short, moved back in, and literally all the moving boxes are still in the house. I'm like, I don't think I can go to my wife and say, you want to move everything to London? So that was a pretty quick no. I was like, eh. And then about a week later he calls and says, well, how about being CEO of the whole business? And I was like, ooh, that sounds much more interesting. Although I must say I was a little unhappy that the guy who took my job as CFO of Vericept I thought I knew and liked, and I liked him less after he did that. And I knew and liked the guy who was the current CEO of Decisioneering. So I had this conflict of like, dang, I'd love to be a CEO. This is what I've been kind of aiming towards. And I like the business. I like spreadsheets. I like the crystal ball. I love the customers. Love the employees. And I was like, but I don't want to like kick Charles out in the street either, right? So that was a bit of a conundrum. And they basically said, look, we're firing the guy tomorrow, whether you take the job or someone else will. So I was like, okay. Well, actually, I had lunch with my wife and said, okay. And so the next morning, I went from, having tan toes, hanging around Boulder, to having a suit on and being down in Denver and meeting the management team at a law office at 7 a.m. And then we went and did an all-hands meeting. And when some employee says, what can we expect from you? And I said, well, if an organization takes on the values of a leader, you can expect, honest, hungry, humble, happy. And we went through a period where we went through some digestion. A lot of employee turnover right away, and people are like, this is not for me. Some people didn't like transparency. If you're in sales, I'm the CFO, look at my flashlight, right? I like measuring things, right? Like, just how hard people are working on stuff, and maybe we need more reps and not sitting on fat territories. And so there's a lot of turnover, but then it settled into a good, cohesive group that stayed together from really 03 to 06 when we sold the company to Hyperion, which again was not by design. I was trying not to sell it. I was trying to buy it.
It's hard to leave behind.
It's hard to leave that one behind. There's too many stories. So SendGrid. So all right, we have the Hyperion.
Oh, you gotta explain the story. I don't think we can leave that.
Right. So after 3 years, the business is doing well. Had values conflict came back between Eric and I and the board. So it was like, okay, we agreed to sell the company. Basically, we couldn't get along anymore. Right. That's not a good reason to sell a company. Right. It's like you should be able to work this stuff out. But that same problems in '99 kind of resurfaced. So it was like, okay, we're doing well. So they wanted to sell the company. We tried to sell it 3 other times unsuccessfully because they're always looking for dumb money, which doesn't exist, and you just waste bankers' time on fishing expeditions. So I had been working with the Carlyle Group, which were users of our software and really liked us, and they said, look, we'll bankroll you to do a roll-up. Let's go take 3 other companies like yours doing all this analytics stuff, and we'll put them together, and this is like a $100 million business, growing at 20% a year with 20% margins. That starts to look like an IPO-able type company, or it's much more interesting, kind of like an SPSS ended up selling to IBM. And so to do this roll-up, we had to buy control away from the current shareholders. But they wouldn't do that if they thought there was dumb money. So I said, sure, I'll go out and do a lap around and talk to some people and see if someone will give us a stupid price for this company, right? Which of course they won't, because they didn't the last 3 times. And then when there's no offers on the table, we're going to put a check on the table, and we're going to put my keys on the table, and I'm just going to go home. The Carlyle guys said, if you do that, they always take the money. And they're going to scream and drop F-bombs, and there's no reason for you to sit there and hear them all. But they're not going to want to do a CEO change and reset themselves, and they've got millions of dollars on the table. So that was the general idea, was that I would do that in the fall, assuming we couldn't sell the company in the summer, which unfortunately we did. Through, again, networking and all that stuff, I met David Mall at VCIR Fall up in Montana on a boondoggle, which was great. And he knew Godfrey Sullivan at Hyperion. He says, if you want to meet Godfrey, let me know. I was like, I'd like to meet Godfrey. Flew out there with a whiteboard and a marker. I told him a story about how we deliver on what they promise. He's like, yep, you do. And we had a great cultural fit. The 5th H is a fun topic among 4-H people to talk about what's the 5th H. And Hyperion was a good 5th H. And we loved Hyperion. It was a perfect fit. Yeah, healthy, helpful. There's a lot of them. So that was the great fit. Sell the company to them was good cash. Everyone was happy. Well, if you're not happy, you're not happy. So not everyone was happy. But we moved on. We're starting our 100-day integration plan. On day 29, Oracle buys Hyperion. All the Hyperion execs are taken out, came into the SendGrid market with a directly competing product. And Amazon Web Services is big, nasty, ugly giant, which usually crushes small startups. And so the board and everyone's kind of like, ooh, I wonder how's Isaac going to react, how the employees going to react, how's CEO candidates going to react. And for me, I thought it was awesome. Right, same reason I got an accounting degree. Ooh, this suddenly got harder, right? I mean, just hanging out with Isaac, watching the numbers fly up to the ceiling is like, what do I do, right? But like now there's a bad guy. It's like, ooh, this is going to be much more fun. And Isaac loves to code and create stuff, right? So he wants to code stuff. He's like, Amazon, pricing strategy, what do we do with them, and who do we tell what when? And he's like, that's not my world. And so I think that kind of pushed him over the edge to say, you deal with all that crap. And I'm like, yay! So that was a good fit. And I was training for Leadville 100 at the time. So I wanted to stay on my training plan through February 28th. So we pushed the start date out to March 1. And I started hanging around the company a little bit before that. But I was able to stay on plan. But March 1, which was a year ago, started at SendGrid. And it was as good as advertised. Revenues are real. The customer traction is amazing. We track 94% of our transactions are all self-serve. So it's the power of your customers being your sales team. So Isaac was 100% focused on having an awesome developer experience. And so that's just what we do. And that's the one decision rule. It's like, does that make developers' lives easier? Do that, right? And so we have a great support team. Joe Scharf heads that up. And so now we have this group in Romania and California. And we're trying to do 24/7. Most of the people have computer science degrees. You can call them. It doesn't matter if you use our stuff, competitor stuff. We'll solve your email problem, as long as it takes. It's just unlimited. And it's a very expensive thing to maintain that team, but I think it's a big part of sort of that mojo we have with with developers that makes the business work.
All right, so why don't we do about 10 to 15 minutes worth of questions, and we've got some food and drink out for networking. And Richard, in terms of first question, the privilege goes to you.
Silicon Flatirons, Foundry Institute, Techstars, Boulder Software Club, Venture Club, obviously very early on. So I wanted to know, besides from financial assistance, which is obviously a very critical thing for any organization or company, individually, what have you gained from each group, and what do you feel you've been able to contribute?
Wow, that's a big question. So I guess maybe the financial assistance, we can start there. So in whatever I do, you try to give what you can, right? So first it's sort of giving time. Then you have more resources, you can sponsor things, whether it's SendGrid or all these Oracle, and also working with startups. We'd love to use your stuff. So if you are a small company here tonight and you're looking for an early customer, I am your easiest target, right? But all the venture people know that in town, so they're like, oh, that's just Jim. But it's great when they had the Oracle logo, right? It's like, where do you have Oracle as a customer? So giving time, giving money when we can. Yeah, there's a lot of different groups. So what was the biggest impact I made? I think like with Rockies, I kind of have done that for the whole period. Like, I left Rockies in '99 when I started Web Families, because starting something takes 100% of your focus, right? And so from '99 to probably '03, between the Web Families and the Vericept era, and they asked me to come back to be the president. And I was like, sure, right? And so I did that '03 to '06, and I made sure that there was a VC on stage every month. Because I think people that have never met a VC, they think it's some mysterious person. It's like, actually, there's just sort of a normal person you can talk to about stuff, and it's not a big deal. You don't need to be overly ready there, Mr. Yates, before you talk to him. I'm in the talk to VCs early and often camp. He's in the, wait till the cake is finished. Yeah, bake the cake and then talk to him, which there's truth to both sides. So I think the big contribution I made there was to try and bring real funding sources on stage and kind of humanize the process. What have I gotten of all this stuff? It's got a sort of a huge network of people, right? Which is great. It's hopeful it's hopeful in all kinds of ways, right? So again, when you get fired a lot, it's good to know a lot of people. One thing I like about Richard, when I got fired, it was the first time or the second time, was his opinion of me didn't change. He runs a very cool thing, a lot of cool things. One thing he does is a CEO forum, and get together once a quarter, right? Well, when you're fired, you're a job seeker. Right? A job seeker is not a CEO. They're different things, if you hadn't noticed, right? But in his view, they're the same, right? He's like, you're Jim, right? It doesn't matter if you were CFO, job seeker, CEO, job seeker, VP sales, job seeker, founder, job seeker, right? It's just, so that consistency was awesome. So you have this whole network. I think having an ecosystem, to help you be successful. So now that we're at SendGrid, we need 5 customers to say good things about us sometimes. Right? It's nice when you have a long list of people you can call, and it's not like you hit them over the head, but they're happy to help. They're like, hey, you fit this certain box. We want someone in that box to say nice things about us. And they're like, happy to, right? And away we go.
Student question? Yeah, back there.
When you're talking about your first company, you said none of the founders were the build it type. And aside from the effect of needing cash flow earlier to pay people to build it, how did that affect the dynamics of the company?
There were so many sort of dynamics in play, sort of maybe other than that one. Because I do think that you read 4-hour work week. But I think the key is that the best time you can have is a co-founder, right? You might be the business designer, and if you have a missing piece, regardless of which piece it is, I think it's possible to to fill it. But to not have someone who is technically competent is certainly a big setback. Just because we hired people at very high rates who did very poor work, and none of us could judge it. Until the results weren't there and deadlines are missed, and it's just like that's. Looking on hindsight, I think about sort of the state of the labor market today. It seems like the tech labor market is very tight, right? It's like full employment and wage rates are going up. But at least even if we're paying medium high prices for people, we're getting awesome people. I'll take that trade all day long. Where I think in hindsight, the market was very difficult and we weren't smart enough on the technology side to know how to hire good people at fair prices, or even good people at high prices. We were getting bad people at high prices, and that's not good.
Other questions?
Dark 3 hymns in the soul, yes. So one of the derivatives of 4-H is trust first. Right, as you trust, you find it's a reflexive property. If you trust first, you get it back. If you're paranoid first, you get that back, right? And then lawyers make money, which is bad. So you got to have lawyers around and do things.
Why
so
are you looking at me?
There's a few lawyers in the room. You're a future lawyer, right? It's like bad lawyers, right? So yeah, if you're in a high paranoid environment, I think that's the worst trait for an entrepreneur or founder is, have high paranoia. Maybe a few industries that make sense, but if you're in anything sort of early stage tech like I do, you've got to be an evangelist and get it out there and share. So it's definitely operate in a very high trust first mode, and then you get burned sometimes, right? And yeah, the firings, that might be sort of those setbacks, and you kind of go, but then you kind of realize I don't want to live looking over your shoulder about that kind of stuff. So it's like you get right back out there and do it again. Isaac's 32.
You're like 34, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So
they're more focused on the development, you're more focused on the business side, and then there is the age gap. How do you
the age gap. So I'm 45. I think Isaac's 31 or 2 or something like that. And he has Jason. So yeah, I think there's definitely some generational gaps going on. So our VP of BD there, Denise, she hired a BD person who's 23, right? And I'd like to say this guy's 23 with 15 years experience because he just totally gets our market, right? Writes for TechCrunch, just really into the whole early stage tech thing. So there's definitely different bands. I was talking to a founder last week at VCIR who's 29, and he was considering hiring a guy also in BD who was 37. And he's like, I just think the guy's too old. He doesn't get it. And of course, I'm looking at him like, you say this to me? 37's too old? I'm like, geez. I just think you got to have the ability to relate to lots of different kinds of people. I think I'm almost the oldest person in our company, which is a little frightening to me because I don't feel that way. I think the bigger gap is technical, non-technical. So all of our founders were technical, and I'm non-technical. And so that's a big difference. And Isaac, our main founder, is also native Spanish speaking, and he's a very slow talker, very slow. And so he says it's very hard to talk to me because I talk fast in English, business speak. So that's got to come across his wire, translate to Spanish computer speak. He has to think of his answer, retranslate it back to English business speak, and fire it back out again. He's like, it's just too much processing power, and he finds it very draining. But we found a good way to make it work. I just sit on my hands and go and try and speak more slowly. And listen, and I think Isaac's awesome. The whole 4-H thing was a perfect match. Super humility. I spent a lot of time with him today, actually. Just very inquisitive and wants to learn. Right? We're just kind of looking at the situation. He was replaying it backwards and kind of saying, well, what could I have done differently to say me not put in this position? Not that there was a big mistake, but just how could I have done better? Right? It's just very, very humble. That's a great trait. But he's super hungry. Anyone who's a founder is super hungry. And finding that duality is a great key. And then age doesn't matter so much.
Last question. Go ahead.
Everybody seems to say that in order to have a successful company, you have to take a decision back. Right? So my question is, why did you, in the first place, decided to move to Boulder instead of Silicon Valley? And where are the resources?
So for those who can't hear in the back, the question relates to the relationship between location and startup, and in particular, do you have to be in Silicon Valley to make it work?
Great question. So at the beginning of the story, I said I was a triathlete and business person, and where they intersect is either San Diego or Boulder. And because I'm not an endless summer guy, Boulder. Never considered Silicon Valley. So if I was in Silicon Valley, that's like if you're one-dimensional, right? If all you want to do is, focus on business, you would do that, right? And so that's one thing I think about the H value, right? Is having a passion outside of work and family is why, kind of in Boulder. That's why there's some conflict. If you get investors from Boston or San Francisco, they kind of expect that, full-on dedication, which in Colorado, we moderate that to some degree. And I think, here, there are good resources and good companies come out of Colorado. We try to promote that. But we've gone back and forth a lot as well. You get on a plane from Denver to SFO, and it's like, you just look around, and hopefully you see some SendGrid logos, but you also see, just a lot of people, shuttling back and forth. I did that for 18 months. I went back and forth every week with Hyperion and Oracle, and it's easy, right, to do that. But I think you can get the talent here, especially what we're good at is the 0 to 20. We're good at starting things. 0 to 20 employees, 0 to 20 million in revenue, 0 to 20 million in market cap. It's like Techstars is here, right? We're good at forming things and starting them, and here you get that sense of you have a community who wants you to be successful. I'm not sure that's necessarily the case there. And also, talent tends to be very loyal here. It's almost like picking a home team, right? If you join SendGrid, you're not thinking, 3 months later, like, oh, I can make 10 grand more if I join, Brad's team, right? And then 3 months later, it's like, oh, I can make 10 grand more a year if I go join Jill's team, right? It's just people are kind of like, hey, I'm happy, I'm getting a fair wage, I got an awesome job, it's flexible, I can do my passion, and life goes on. So I thought about opening an office in Mountain View with regard to SendGrid, and it was Brad Feld, thank you, told me why that wasn't a good idea. He says, Jim, you've been in Boulder too long. He's like, in Mountain View, yeah, 3 months from now, you have an awesome team. 9 months from now, you'll have a different awesome team because they'll all move around, right? And it's just like, that's not how you operate. And so I was like, good idea. So we have a technical office in Orange County where the founders are from. So we probably have 60% of our employees here and 40% there. A lot of challenges about managing 2 offices, but that's another story. Jet fuel and alcohol. Cancun.
This has been fantastic. Let's thank Jim for a terrific discussion.
Thanks for having me.
Here's networking out in the hall. Get some food, drink. We'll network up. Enjoy.
You guys get the gloves.
Great job.
No.